My daughter-in-law called my cooking poison at dinner, so I served her real poison and watched her choke. What happened at that dinner table will shock you to your core. Before we begin, hit that like button, share this story, and let me know in the comments where you're listening from. The story you're about to listen to changed my life forever, and I promise you'll never see family dinners the same way again. My name is Rose, and I'm 66 years old. For most of my life, I believed that love meant sacrifice. I believed that being a good mother, a good woman, meant putting everyone else first, even when it slowly killed me inside. I was wrong, dead wrong, and it took the most humiliating night of my life to finally wake up. It was March 15th, my son Danny's 32nd birthday. I'd been planning this dinner for weeks, just like I always did. The dining room was decorated with his favorite colors, deep blues and silver. I'd polished the good china, the set that belonged to my grandmother, and arranged fresh flowers I'd picked from my own garden. Everything had to be perfect. It always had to be perfect. I stood in my kitchen that afternoon, my hands working the dough for Danny's favorite dish, my mother's recipe for stuffed cabbage rolls, the same recipe I'd made for his birthday every single year since he turned 5. My fingers, weathered and marked with age spots now, moved with practiced ease. These hands had fed my family for decades. These hands had never let them down. "Rose, are you almost done in there?" Maya's voice cut through my thoughts like a blade. My daughter-in-law, 28 years old, beautiful in that sharp, modern way that made me feel invisible. She'd moved into my house 3 years ago when she and Danny were going through financial troubles. What was supposed to be temporary had somehow become permanent. "Just finishing up the rolls, dear," I called back, forcing cheerfulness into my voice. I'd learned to do that, to swallow whatever I really felt and serve up pleasantness instead. Maya appeared in the doorway, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the frame. She was wearing a black dress that probably cost more than my monthly groceries. Her dark hair swept up in a way that made her neck look elegant and long. Everything about her was sharp edges and calculated beauty. "Danny's parents are going to be here soon," she said, checking her phone. "Are you sure you know what you're doing with that food?" The way she said food made my stomach clench, like it was something disgusting, something beneath her. "I've been making this recipe for 30 years, Maya. It's Danny's favorite." She made a sound that might have been a laugh, but there was no humor in it. "Right. Well, maybe it's time for some new favorites." I watched her walk away, her heels clicking against the hardwood floors I'd mopped that morning, the floors I mopped every morning. I turned back to my cabbage rolls, my hands shaking, just slightly now, not from age, from something else. Something that had been building inside me for months. The guests arrived at 6 sharp. Danny's friends from work, his college buddies, even his ex-girlfriend Sarah, who Maya insisted on inviting because they were so close now. The house filled with laughter and conversation that somehow never seemed to include me. I was the waitress, the maid, the invisible woman who kept the glasses full and the plates coming. I carried the platter of cabbage rolls to the dining room with pride. They looked beautiful, golden brown and perfectly formed, steam rising from them like incense. This was my art, my love language. Food was how I'd always shown my family I cared. "Oh, wow, Rose," Danny said as I set the platter down. "These look amazing, just like when I was a kid." My heart swelled. This was why I did it. This moment, this smile on my son's face, this was worth everything. Everyone served themselves, the conversation flowing around the table. I sat at the far end, as usual, watching my family and friends enjoy the meal I'd spent all day preparing. Maya took a small portion, barely 2 bites worth, and picked at it with her fork like she was dissecting something unpleasant. "So, Rose," Sarah said, taking a large bite, "this is delicious. You have to give me the recipe." "Oh, it's my mother's recipe," I began, feeling warm and useful for the first time all evening. "She taught me when I was just, oh my God." Maya's voice cut through the table conversation like a scream. Everyone stopped talking. Every fork froze midway to mouths. Maya was holding her napkin to her lips, her face twisted in disgust. "What's wrong?" Danny asked, his voice concerned. Maya looked directly at me, her eyes cold and hard. "This tastes like poison. Are you trying to kill us?" The words hit me like a physical blow. The room went completely silent. I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the corner, could hear someone's breathing, could hear my own heart hammering against my ribs. "Maya," Danny started. "No, seriously," she continued, her voice getting louder. "This is inedible. How old is this cabbage? Did you even check the expiration dates on anything?" She turned to the other guests, playing to an audience now. "I'm sorry, everyone. I think we should order pizza." A few people laughed. Nervous, uncomfortable laughter, but laughter nonetheless. Sarah put down her fork. Danny's friend Mike pushed his plate away slightly. One by one, they all stopped eating my food. "The cabbage is fresh," I said quietly, my voice barely audible. "I bought it yesterday." "Fresh?" Maya laughed, and this time there was nothing nervous about it. "Rose, honey, maybe it's time to admit that your cooking days are behind you. This stuff could actually poison someone." More laughter. Danny sat there saying nothing. My son, the boy I'd raised alone after his father died when he was only 8, the boy I'd sold my wedding ring to put through college, the boy I'd given up my dreams for, my life for. He sat there and said nothing while his wife humiliated me in front of everyone. I stood up slowly, my legs unsteady. I'll go get dessert ready." "Actually," Maya said, not even looking at me, "I picked up a cake from that new bakery downtown, the good one. I figured we'd need backup." The good one, as opposed to my baking, which apparently wasn't good enough anymore. I walked to the kitchen on autopilot, my hands trembling as I gripped the counter. 40 years of cooking for this family. 40 years of birthday cakes and holiday meals and late-night snacks when Danny was studying for exams. 40 years of pouring my love into every dish, every recipe passed down from my mother and her mother before her. Poison. She called my cooking poison. I could hear them in the dining room, the conversation already moving on. Maya was telling some story about her job, her voice bright and animated. The humiliation was already forgotten by everyone except me. For them, it was just a moment. For me, it was everything. I stood there for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, staring at the leftover cabbage rolls on the counter. They looked perfect to me. They smelled like home, like comfort, like every Sunday dinner of my childhood. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe I'd been wrong about everything. Later that night, after the guests had gone home with their bellies full of store-bought cake, after the dishes were done and the decorations put away, I lay in my bed listening. The walls in this old house were thin. I could hear Danny and Maya talking in their room down the hall. "She's getting worse," Maya was saying. "Did you see how confused she looked when I mentioned the expiration dates? And that food? Danny, what if she actually makes someone sick?" "She's been cooking for 30 years, Maya. She knows what she's doing." Did she? Because that meal was honestly disgusting. And I'm not being mean, I'm being honest. Your mother is 66 years old. Maybe it's time to consider some options. Options. I knew what that meant. What kind of options? There are some really nice assisted living places. Places where she'd have people to take care of her, where she wouldn't have to worry about cooking or cleaning anymore. It might be better for everyone. I don't know. Danny, be realistic. She can't live here forever. And honestly, after tonight, I don't feel comfortable eating anything she makes. What if she really does poison someone by accident? There it was again. That word. Poison. I pulled my pillow over my head, but I could still hear them. They talked for another hour about my future, about my life, about what to do with me, like I was a problem to be solved, rather than a person who had feelings, like I was already gone. That night, I made a decision. If they thought my cooking was poison, if they thought I was too old, too confused, too much of a burden, then maybe it was time to show them what real poison looked like. Not the kind that came from expired food or poor cooking, the kind that came from years of disrespect, ingratitude, and taking someone's love for granted. I'd spent my whole life being the good woman, the sacrificing mother, the one who smiled and served and never complained. I'd given up everything, my dreams of opening a bakery, my social life, my own identity, to take care of my family. And what did I have to show for it? A son who couldn't defend me and a daughter-in-law who thought I was a joke. But they were about to learn that even the sweetest ingredients can turn bitter when they're not appreciated. And sometimes, the most dangerous poison is the one that's been brewing quietly for years, waiting for the right moment to strike. As I lay there in the dark listening to them plan my future without me, I started planning a future of my own. One where Rose wouldn't be invisible anymore. One where the people who had taken my kindness for weakness would finally understand who they were dealing with. They wanted to get rid of me? Fine. But first, I was going to give them a taste of their own medicine. And unlike my cooking, this recipe would be one they'd never forget. The next few days passed like a slow torture. I woke up each morning at 5:30, just like I had for the past 40 years, and went through the motions of being the invisible woman in my own home. I made coffee that Maya complained was too weak. I prepared breakfast that Danny ate while scrolling through his phone, never once looking up to acknowledge me. I cleaned bathrooms, folded laundry, and dusted furniture that no one noticed until it was dirty again. But something had changed inside me that night. The humiliation had cracked something open, and now I couldn't unsee the truth of my situation. I wasn't a beloved mother and grandmother in waiting. I wasn't the heart of this home. I was free labor. I was a convenience. And the moment I became inconvenient, they were ready to ship me off to some facility where I could fade away quietly. Maya had started treating me like I was already gone. She spoke to me the way you'd talk to a senile old woman, slowly and loudly, as if I'd lost my hearing along with my mind. "Rose, did you remember to take your medication this morning?" she'd ask, even though I wasn't on any medication except for a daily vitamin. "Rose, are you sure you turned off the stove? I smell something burning." There was never anything burning. She just wanted to plant seeds of doubt in Danny's mind about my competence. "Rose, maybe you should sit down and rest. You look confused." I wasn't confused. I was angry. But anger in an old woman is dismissed as confusion, isn't it? The worst part was watching Danny, my son, who used to defend me against bullies at school, who used to tell me I was the best mom in the world, now just nodded along with his wife's concerns. He'd started looking at me with that expression I'd seen before. The look people get when they're watching someone they love disappear into old age. Pity mixed with impatience. Love mixed with burden. On Thursday morning, 3 days after the dinner party, Maya threw away my favorite baking pan. It was an old aluminum sheet pan that had belonged to my mother, dented and darkened with age but perfectly seasoned. I'd made thousands of cookies on that pan, birthday cakes, dinner rolls for every holiday. I found it in the trash can outside, sitting on top of coffee grounds and eggshells. "Maya," I called as I walked back into the house, the pan clutched in my hands. This was in the trash. She looked up from her laptop where she was typing away at something important enough to ignore me for the past hour. "Oh, that old thing." "Yeah, I threw it out. It was gross, Rose. Like seriously gross. I bought you new ones. They're in the kitchen." I walked to the kitchen and found 3 shiny new pans still in their packaging. Non-stick coating, modern design, everything Maya thought I needed to cook properly. But they weren't mine. They had no history, no memories baked into their surfaces. "This pan belonged to my mother," I said quietly when she followed me into the kitchen. "And I'm sure it served its purpose," she replied, already losing interest in the conversation. "But honey, it's time to upgrade. Those old things harbor bacteria. It's not sanitary. Not sanitary." My mother's baking pan, which had fed 3 generations of my family, was not sanitary according to Maya. That afternoon, while Danny was at work and Maya was at her yoga class, I sat in my bedroom and cried. Real tears, the kind that come from somewhere deep inside your chest and leave you feeling hollow afterward. I cried for my mother's baking pan. I cried for the dinner party humiliation. I cried for all the small deaths I'd been dying for months without even realizing it. But then I dried my eyes and did something I hadn't done in years. I called my sister Linda. Linda lived 2 states away, and we'd grown apart over the years, the way siblings do when life gets busy. But she answered on the second ring, and the moment I heard her voice, the floodgates opened. "Rose? What's wrong? You sound terrible." I told her everything. The dinner party, the assisted living comments, the baking pan. I told her about feeling invisible in my own home, about being treated like a burden instead of a mother. Linda listened without interrupting, making small sounds of sympathy and outrage in all the right places. "Rose," she said when I was finished, "you need to get out of there." "Where would I go?" "This is my home." "Is it? It sounds like you're living in their home, following their rules, being their unpaid housekeeper. When did you sign the deed over to Danny?" The question hit me like a slap. I didn't. I put his name on it when he moved back in, but legally, it's still your house. "Well, yes, but..." "No buts, Rose. It's your house. Your name is on the deed. You can make the rules." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what Linda had said. It was my house. Legally, officially, it belonged to me. I'd bought it with the life insurance money when my husband died, had paid the mortgage for 25 years with my job at the elementary school. Danny's name was on the deed as a joint owner, yes, but that didn't make him the boss of me. The next morning, I made a decision. I was going to take back some control over my life. Starting small, I made eggs Benedict for breakfast. It was Danny's favorite, something I used to make for special occasions when he was growing up. The hollandaise sauce required careful attention, constant whisking, precise timing. It was the kind of cooking Maya thought I was too old and confused to handle. When Danny came down for breakfast, his face lit up. "Mom, you made eggs Benedict? It's been years." "I thought you might enjoy it," I said, serving him a perfect plate with golden hollandaise dripping down the sides of the poached eggs. Maya appeared a few minutes later, already dressed for work in one of her sharp business suits. She looked at Danny's plate with obvious suspicion. "What's all this?" "Mom made eggs Benedict," Danny said through a mouthful of food. "God, I'd forgotten how good these are." Maya's expression tightened. "Rose, that sauce has raw egg yolk in it. Are you sure it's safe?" There it was again. The implication that I didn't know what I was doing, that I was dangerous. "I've been making hollandaise sauce for 30 years, Maya. I think I know how to do it safely." "I'm just saying, food poisoning is no joke, especially for someone your age. Someone my age. Like I was already 1 foot in the grave." Danny looked between us, sensing the tension but not understanding it. "It tastes fine to me," he said, taking another bite. Maya poured herself a cup of coffee and made a face. "This coffee is cold, Rose." And weak. I'd made the coffee exactly the way I always did. It wasn't cold and it wasn't weak, but Maya needed to find fault with something I'd done. It was becoming a pattern. "I'll make a fresh pot," I said quietly. "Don't bother. I'll grab something on my way to work." She kissed Danny goodbye and headed for the door, then turned back. "Danny, we should probably talk tonight about the conversation we had the other night. The conversation about putting me in a home." She said it right in front of me, like I wasn't there, like I didn't matter. After they both left for work, I sat in my kitchen surrounded by the breakfast dishes and made another decision. I wasn't going to fade away quietly. I wasn't going to be shuffled off to some facility where I could be forgotten. If Maya wanted to play games, if she wanted to treat me like I was incompetent and dangerous, then maybe it was time to show her what dangerous really looked like. That afternoon, I drove to the library and used their computer to look up information about assisted living facilities, not because I was planning to go to one, but because I wanted to understand what they were planning for me. The websites showed smiling old people playing bingo and doing crafts, but I could read between the lines. These were places where families put their elderly relatives when they became inconvenient. Clean, comfortable warehouses for people who had outlived their usefulness. The average cost was $4,000 a month. $4,000 for a small room, institutional food, and supervised activities designed to keep us busy until we died. Meanwhile, Maya and Danny would have my house to themselves, free of the burden of caring for an aging mother. But there was something else I found during my research: information about elder abuse, about financial exploitation, about adult children who pushed their parents into unnecessary care facilities to gain control of their assets. I printed out several articles and tucked them into my purse. When I got home, I called my lawyer. Harold Brennan had handled my husband's will and had helped me with various legal matters over the years. He was probably close to retirement himself by now, but his secretary said he could see me the next day. That evening, Danny and Maya had their talk. I wasn't invited, of course, but I could hear them through the thin walls. They spoke about me like I was a pet they were trying to rehome. "She's just not safe living independently anymore," Maya was saying. "Did you see her with that hollandaise sauce this morning? Raw eggs, Danny. She could have given us salmonella." "The eggs Benedict was fine, Maya. It tasted just like it did when I was a kid." "That's exactly my point. She's living in the past. She can't adapt to modern food safety standards. And what about her driving? When's the last time she had her eyes checked, her reflexes tested?" "My driving was fine. My eyes were fine. I'd had a physical 6 months ago, and my doctor said I was in excellent health for my age." But facts didn't matter to Maya. She was building a case against me, collecting evidence of my incompetence like a prosecutor preparing for trial. "I just think we should slow down," Danny said. "Maybe look into some help around the house before we start talking about assisted living." "Help around the house costs money, Danny. Money we're trying to save for our own future. Do you want to start a family someday, or do you want to spend the next 10 years paying for home health aides?" A family. They were planning to have children, my grandchildren. And they saw me as an obstacle to that future, rather than someone who could help with it. "I don't know," Danny said. "It just feels wrong making decisions about Mom's life without including her." "We're not making decisions without her. We're going to present her with options. Good options. Places where she'll be safe and well cared for." Safe. Well cared for. The same words people use when they're putting their dog to sleep. I lay in bed that night planning my visit to Harold Brennan. I needed to understand my legal options. I needed to know what rights I had as a homeowner, as a mother, as a human being who still had all her faculties, despite what Maya wanted everyone to believe. But more than that, I needed to start planning my own future. Because listening to Danny and Maya talk about me like I was already gone had made one thing crystal clear. I couldn't depend on them to care about what I wanted. If I was going to survive this, I needed to start fighting back. The next morning, I woke up with a plan, not just for the lawyer visit, but for something bigger, something that would shift the balance of power in this house. Maya thought she could manipulate my son against me, thought she could push me out of my own home by making me feel incompetent and unwanted. But Maya had made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated me. She saw an old woman who baked cookies and cleaned house, and she assumed that was all I was. She had no idea who Rose really was underneath all those years of being the perfect mother and wife. It was time to remind everyone exactly who they were dealing with. As I got dressed for my appointment with Harold, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. For the first time in months, my eyes looked alive again. Dangerous, even. Maya wanted to see poison. Fine, but not the kind that came from bad cooking or expired food. The most dangerous poison is the kind that comes from a woman who has nothing left to lose. And Maya had just pushed me to that point. Harold Brennan's office still smelled like old leather and coffee. just like it had 20 years ago when I'd first walked in there as a grieving widow trying to understand my husband's will. Harold himself had aged considerably. His hair was completely white now, and he moved more slowly than I remembered, but his mind was still sharp as a tack. "Rose," he said, standing up from behind his massive oak desk to shake my hand. "It's been too long. How are you holding up?" "That's what I'm here to talk to you about, Harold." I sat down in the familiar chair across from his desk and pulled out the folder I'd prepared. Inside were copies of my deed, my will, bank statements, and the articles I'd printed about elder abuse. Harold put on his reading glasses and examined everything carefully while I explained my situation. "So let me make sure I understand this correctly," he said when I finished. "Your son and daughter-in-law are living in your house, which you own outright. They're pressuring you to move to assisted living, claiming you're no longer competent to live independently, and you believe this is motivated by their desire to gain control of your assets." "That's exactly right." Harold leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Rose, how old are you now?" 66. "And you're in good health?" "Excellent health. Dr. Martinez gave me a clean bill just 6 months ago." "Any history of dementia or cognitive decline in your family?" "None. My mother lived to 91 and was sharp until the day she died." Harold nodded slowly. "Then what they're suggesting is not only premature, it's potentially illegal. Adult children cannot force a competent parent into assisted living against their will. They would need to prove in court that you're unable to care for yourself, and based on what you've told me, they don't have grounds for that." Relief flooded through me. "So I can refuse?" "Absolutely. More than that, Rose, since it's your house, you can set the terms for who lives there. If you want your son and daughter-in-law to move out, you have every legal right to ask them to leave." The idea was so radical it took my breath away. I could make them leave? I could reclaim my own home? "However," Harold continued, "I should warn you that family disputes like this can get ugly. Are you prepared for the possibility that this could damage your relationship with your son?" I thought about Danny sitting silently while Maya humiliated me at dinner. I thought about him nodding along with her concerns about my competence. I thought about them planning my future without me. "Harold, I think that relationship is already damaged. I'm just the only one who's been pretending it isn't." Before I left his office, Harold helped me draft a formal letter establishing my mental competence and my rights as a homeowner. He also gave me the contact information for a geriatric psychiatrist who could provide an official evaluation if needed. "Rose," he said as he walked me to the door, "you might also want to consider updating your will. Make sure your wishes are crystal clear, especially regarding your property." "I'll think about it." "And Rose?" "Document everything. If they're really trying to manipulate you into assisted living for financial gain, you'll want evidence of that." I drove home feeling more empowered than I had in months. But as I pulled into my driveway, I saw Maya's car was already there. She was supposed to be at work until 5. My stomach tightened with anxiety. I found her in the kitchen, going through my cabinets with a notepad in her hand. She was checking expiration dates on everything: my spices, canned goods, even my tea bags. "What are you doing?" I asked. She jumped, clearly not expecting me back so soon. "Oh, Rose, I came home early with a headache and thought I'd help you organize the kitchen. Some of this stuff is really old." She held up a container of oregano. "This expired in 2019, and this soup can is from 2018. Rose, this is exactly what I was talking about. You're not keeping track of things properly." I looked at the items she'd pulled out. The oregano still smelled fine. Dried spices don't really go bad, they just lose potency. The soup can had no rust or dents and was perfectly safe to eat. But Maya was creating evidence of my supposed incompetence. "I was organizing," I said firmly. "I know what's in my own cabinets." "Sweetie, I'm not criticizing. I'm just worried about you. What if you accidentally used something spoiled? What if you made yourself sick?" There was something in her tone, a fake sweetness that made my skin crawl. She was talking to me like I was a child. Worse, she was creating a narrative, evidence that she could point to later when she wanted to prove I wasn't capable of living alone. "Maya, put my things back, please." Of course. I just thought we should throw out the expired stuff, for safety. She started putting items back in the cabinets, but I noticed she palmed the oregano container and slipped it into her pocket when she thought I wasn't looking. She was building a case against me, collecting evidence of my incompetence. That evening, I excused myself early and went to my room. But instead of going to bed, I opened my laptop and started researching. If Maya wanted to play games, I needed to understand the rules. I spent 3 hours reading about elder abuse, financial exploitation, and the warning signs of adult children trying to gain control of their parents' assets. Everything I read described my situation perfectly. The isolation, the undermining of confidence, the creation of false evidence of incompetence, the pressure to make major life changes for your own good. But I also found something else. Stories of elderly people who had fought back and won. People who had refused to be pushed out of their own lives. People who had reclaimed their power. One story particularly caught my attention. A 70-year-old woman in Oregon whose daughter had been slowly taking control of her finances and trying to force her into a nursing home. The woman had secretly consulted with lawyers and financial advisors, then surprised her daughter by transferring all her assets into a trust and changing the locks on her house. The daughter had been furious, threatening to sue, claiming her mother was incompetent. But the woman had documentation of her mental acuity and evidence of her daughter's manipulation. In the end, the daughter had been forced to move out and get her own place. I closed my laptop and stared at the ceiling. Could I do something like that? Did I have the courage to take back control of my life so dramatically? The next morning, Maya was gone when I woke up. Danny was in the kitchen making coffee, and for the first time in weeks, we were alone together. "Morning, Mom," he said, not looking up from his phone. "Danny, can we talk?" Something in my tone made him glance up. "Sure. What's up?" I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat down across from him. "I need you to know that I heard you and Maya talking the other night about assisted living." His face flushed red. "Mom, Let me finish. I understand that you're concerned about me, but I want you to know that I'm not ready for that. I'm healthy, I'm competent, and I want to stay in my own home." "Of course you do. And no one's trying to force you into anything. We're just exploring options for the future." "Whose future, Danny?" "Because it sounds like you're planning my future without consulting me." He set down his phone and really looked at me for the first time in months. "Mom, Maya's just worried about you. We both are. Some of the things you've been doing lately..." "Like what?" "Like the hollandaise sauce. And Maya found expired food in the cabinets. And you seem, I don't know, more forgetful lately." I felt my temper rising. "Danny, I've been making hollandaise sauce since before you were born. It was perfect and you know it. And those expired items Maya found? Oregano from 2019 and a can of soup from 2018. Both perfectly safe to use." "I don't know about food safety rules, Mom. But Maya does. Danny, your wife has been systematically undermining me for months. She criticizes everything I cook, everything I clean, everything I do. She's trying to make you think I'm incompetent." Danny's expression hardened. "Mom, Maya loves you. She's not trying to undermine anyone." "She threw away my mother's baking pan, Danny, the one I've used for 30 years. She called it unsanitary. Maybe it was time for a new one." The casual dismissal in his voice broke something inside me. This wasn't my son talking. This was Maya's puppet, programmed to agree with her on everything. "Danny," I said quietly, "whose name is on the deed to this house?" "Mine and yours." "Why?" "Because lately, it feels like Maya thinks she owns this place, and you're letting her. That's not fair, Mom. Isn't it? When's the last time you defended me against one of her comments? When's the last time you told her that maybe she was wrong about something?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Mom, you're putting me in an impossible position." "No, Danny. Maya is putting you in an impossible position. She's making you choose between your wife and your mother, and you're choosing her." "I'm not choosing anyone. I'm trying to do what's best for everyone." "What's best for everyone? Or what's easiest for Maya?" Before he could answer, we heard her car in the driveway. Danny immediately stood up and started busying himself with dishes, clearly not wanting Maya to walk in on our conversation. Maya breezed in, carrying coffee and pastries from her favorite bakery downtown. "Good morning, you two. I brought breakfast." She set the bags on the counter and kissed Danny's cheek. "How's everyone doing this morning?" "Fine," Danny said quickly. "Mom and I were just talking." Maya's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Oh? About anything interesting?" "Just catching up," I said before Danny could respond. "That's nice." Maya started unpacking the pastries, expensive-looking croissants and muffins that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in a week. I thought we could have a nice breakfast together, like a family. Like a family. The word stung because we used to be a family, before Maya decided I was a problem to be solved. As we sat around the table eating her store-bought pastries, I watched the dynamic between them. Maya talked about her day, her work, her plans for the weekend. Danny listened and responded, engaged and animated. But when I tried to contribute to the conversation, Maya would either ignore me or make some subtle comment that shut me down. "Rose, you've got some crumbs on your shirt," she said at one point, even though I'd been eating carefully. "Rose, you might want to get your hearing checked." "I said that twice," she said, when I asked her to repeat something she'd mumbled. "Rose, are you feeling okay? You look confused," she said when I paused to think about how to respond to one of her comments. Each little dig was designed to make me look incompetent in front of Danny, and it was working. I could see him watching me with that concerned expression, cataloging each moment as evidence that Maya was right to be worried about me. After breakfast, Maya announced that she'd made an appointment for us to tour an assisted living facility on Saturday. "Just to look," she said quickly when she saw my expression. "No pressure. I thought it would be good for all of us to see what the options are." "I don't want to tour any facilities," I said firmly. "Mom," Danny said, "it wouldn't hurt to just look." "It would hurt me, Danny. It would hurt me a lot." Maya reached across the table and patted my hand in a gesture that looked caring but felt condescending. "Rose, I know change is scary, but sometimes we have to do things that are scary because they're what's best for us." "What's best for me," I said, pulling my hand away, "is staying in my own home." "Of course it is," Maya said soothingly, "and maybe that will be possible. But we need to have backup plans. What if you fell and hurt yourself? What if you had a medical emergency? What if your memory started to go?" "My memory is fine." "Of course it is. Right now. But Rose, you're 66 years old. Things can change quickly at your age." "At your age." There it was again, that phrase that reduced me to nothing but a number, that dismissed everything I was and everything I'd accomplished because I'd had the audacity to get older. I stood up from the table. "I'm going to my room." "Mom," Danny called after me, but I didn't stop. I spent the rest of the day in my bedroom, but I wasn't hiding. I was planning. I pulled out the business card Harold had given me and called the geriatric psychiatrist. I made an appointment for a full cognitive evaluation. I wanted official documentation that my mind was sound. Then I called my bank and made an appointment with a financial advisor. I wanted to understand all my options for protecting my assets. Finally, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my old friend Beth from the elementary school where I used to work. Beth had retired the same year I did, and we'd lost touch over the years. But she answered on the first ring, and her voice was warm and familiar. "Rose, what a wonderful surprise. How are you, honey?" I found myself telling her everything. The whole story poured out of me, and Beth listened with the kind of attention I'd forgotten existed. She didn't interrupt, didn't offer solutions, just let me talk. "Rose," she said when I was finished, "you know what this sounds like to me? It sounds like you've been living in someone else's house instead of your own, and it's time to take it back. I don't know how. You start small. You start asserting yourself in little ways. You stop asking permission to live your own life." That night, I made a decision. Tomorrow, I was going to start taking back my life, starting with my kitchen. But first, there was something else I needed to do, something I'd been putting off because it felt too scary, too final. I needed to understand exactly what Maya and Danny were planning, and that meant I was going to have to do some investigating of my own. I waited until they were both asleep, then crept downstairs to Maya's laptop. She'd left it open on the dining room table, the screen dark but not locked. I touched the mouse pad and it came to life. What I found there made my blood run cold. Maya had been researching assisted living facilities for weeks. She'd already filled out preliminary applications for 3 different places. She'd calculated the cost of my care against the value of my house and determined that they could afford to keep me in a facility for approximately 8 years, using my assets. 8 years. She'd calculated how long I was going to live. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the email thread I found between Maya and someone named Jennifer Walsh. Jennifer, it turned out, was Maya's sister, and their conversation made it clear that this wasn't just about getting me out of the house. It was about money. "The house alone is worth at least $300,000, Maya had written. Plus, she's got about $150,000 in savings and investments. If we can get her into assisted living, we'll have complete control over the property. Danny doesn't understand the financial opportunity here, but I do." Jennifer's response was even more damning. "You're right to move fast. The longer you wait, the more chance she has to change her will or transfer assets. Have you thought about getting power of attorney?" "Working on it. I'm documenting her forgetfulness and confusion, building a case that she needs help managing her affairs." I sat there in the dark, staring at the screen, feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. This wasn't about concern for my welfare. This was about stealing my life savings and my home. Maya had been systematically building a case against me, documenting false evidence of my incompetence, all so she could gain control of my assets. I forwarded the entire email thread to my own account, then carefully closed the laptop and crept back upstairs. But I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. Maya thought she was so clever. She thought she could manipulate a helpless old woman out of her life savings. She thought I was too confused and forgetful to fight back. She was about to learn how wrong she was. But what Maya didn't know was that I'd just found the perfect weapon to use against her. Because if she wanted to play the game of poison, if she wanted to see what real toxicity looked like, I was about to give her a master class. The most dangerous mistake Maya had made wasn't underestimating my intelligence. It was forgetting that I'd raised a son, run a household, and survived being widowed at 46. I was a lot stronger than she thought, and I was about to prove it. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. Maya's emails had shown me exactly who I was dealing with, and now I knew this wasn't about family concern or my safety. This was about greed, pure and simple. But Maya had made one crucial error in her calculations. She'd underestimated exactly who she was trying to con. I got dressed carefully that morning, choosing my best blouse and the pearl necklace my husband had given me for our 20th anniversary. If I was going to war, I was going to look like someone worth fighting for. Danny had already left for work, but Maya was in the kitchen drinking her expensive coffee and scrolling through her phone. She looked up when I entered, and I saw something flicker in her eyes when she noticed how I was dressed. "Going somewhere special today, Rose?" "I have some errands to run." I poured myself coffee and sat down across from her. Maya, I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about touring that assisted living place. Her face lit up with false enthusiasm. Really? That's wonderful, Rose. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised by how nice these places can be. I'm sure I will be. But before we do that, I'd like to have a family meeting, all three of us. Tonight? A family meeting? Yes, I think we need to have an honest conversation about expectations and boundaries. If we're going to be making major decisions about my future, I want everything out in the open. Maya's smile wavered slightly. Of course, that sounds very mature. Mature. Like I was a child who was finally learning to behave properly. I'll make dinner, I continued. Something special. Maya, is there anything you particularly like? Oh, you don't have to go to any trouble, Rose. It's no trouble at all. I want this to be a nice evening, a chance for us to really talk without any distractions. After Maya left for work, I drove to the grocery store with a very specific list in mind. I was going to make Maya's favorite meal, chicken parmesan with homemade pasta, but I was also going to make sure this dinner would be unforgettable in ways she couldn't imagine. At the store, I carefully selected everything I needed: fresh chicken breasts, good quality mozzarella, San Marzano tomatoes for the sauce. I also picked up fresh basil, pine nuts for pesto, and most importantly, a bag of whole wheat flour for making pasta from scratch. But there was one more stop I needed to make: the health food store on the other side of town, where I knew they carried specialty items. I found what I was looking for in the supplements section: a bottle of ipecac syrup, the old-fashioned remedy for accidental poisoning that worked by inducing vomiting. I read the label carefully. A small amount could cause nausea and stomach upset. A larger amount would cause immediate and violent vomiting. It was completely safe. Doctors had used it for decades to treat poisoning, but it would certainly make someone very uncomfortable for a few hours. Back home, I spent the afternoon cooking with more care and attention than I'd given to any meal in years. This wasn't just dinner. This was a performance. Every dish had to be perfect because tonight I was going to serve Maya exactly what she'd been serving me for months: a taste of her own medicine. I made the pasta dough by hand, kneading it until it was silky and smooth. I prepared the chicken, pounding it thin and coating it in seasoned breadcrumbs. I simmered the tomato sauce slowly, adding herbs and wine until it smelled like heaven. And then, very carefully, I prepared Maya's special portion. I'd done my research. A small amount of ipecac mixed into food would be undetectable, especially in a rich tomato sauce. It wouldn't hurt her. Not really. But it would make her very sick for a few hours. Sick enough to understand what it felt like to be accused of poisoning people with your cooking. As I worked, I thought about the emails I'd found, about Maya's calculated plan to steal my life savings. I thought about her throwing away my mother's baking pan and criticizing everything I cooked. I thought about her fake concern and her condescending comments about my age and competence. By 6 o'clock, everything was ready. The dining room table was set with my best china and silver. Candles were lit, wine was breathing, and the smell of garlic and herbs filled the house. It looked like a celebration. In a way, it was. Danny arrived home first, stopping in the doorway of the dining room with surprise. "Mom, this looks incredible. What's the occasion?" I wanted to make a nice dinner for our family meeting. We have some important things to discuss. Maya arrived a few minutes later, and I could see her taking in the elaborate spread with confusion and something that might have been suspicion. "Rose, you didn't have to go to all this trouble." It wasn't any trouble. I wanted tonight to be special. We sat down, and I served the salad first, simple greens with a light vinaigrette. Maya ate carefully, as she always did, commenting on how fresh everything tasted. She was clearly on edge, waiting for the other shoe to drop. The pasta course came next. I'd made 3 plates, one for each of us. Danny's and mine were perfectly normal, delicious homemade fettuccine with marinara sauce. Maya's looked identical, but it contained my special ingredient. "This is amazing, Mom," Danny said after his first bite. I forgot how good your homemade pasta is." Maya took a smaller bite, chewing thoughtfully. "It's very good, Rose. Thank you." I watched her eat, feeling a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. It would take about 15 minutes for the ipecac to take effect, just enough time for us to have our family meeting. "So," I said as we ate, "I wanted to talk to you both about some things that have been on my mind lately." "Of course," Maya said, though she looked wary. "I've been feeling like there's been some tension in the house lately, some miscommunication about expectations and roles." Danny glanced between Maya and me. "What kind of miscommunication?" "Well, for example, Maya seems to have some concerns about my ability to live independently. I wanted to address those concerns directly." Maya set down her fork. "Rose, we've talked about this. It's not that we don't think you're capable. We're just thinking ahead." "Thinking ahead to what, exactly?" "To a time when you might need more help, more support." "And what kind of support are you thinking about?" Maya was starting to look uncomfortable, and not just from our conversation. She'd eaten about half her pasta, and I could see a slight sheen of perspiration on her forehead. "Well, eventually you might need assisted living or memory care. These things are easier to plan for if you start early." "Memory care?" "Maya, do you think I have memory problems?" "Not now, necessarily. But Rose, you're not getting any younger." Danny was looking increasingly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "Maybe we should talk about this later." "No," I said firmly. "I think we should talk about it now. Maya, I'm curious about something. You seem very concerned about my mental competence. Have you been documenting this somehow?" Maya's face went pale. "What do you mean?" "I mean, have you been keeping track of instances where you think I've been forgetful or confused, building some kind of case?" "No, of course not." But she was lying, and we both knew it. Maya was also starting to look distinctly unwell. She was touching her stomach and had stopped eating entirely. "Because," I continued, "I found it interesting that you've been researching assisted living facilities, making applications, calculating costs." Danny looked confused. "Maya, what is she talking about?" Maya tried to speak, but she was clearly fighting nausea now. "Rose, I don't know what you think you found, but—" "I found your emails, Maya, all of them, including the ones to your sister about gaining control of my assets." The room went completely silent, except for the sound of Maya's labored breathing. Danny stared at his wife, comprehension slowly dawning on his face. "What emails?" Danny asked quietly. Maya suddenly pushed back from the table and ran toward the bathroom. "We could—" hear her retching violently from down the hall. Danny turned to me, his face a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. "Mom, what's going on?" I reached into my purse and pulled out the printed emails I'd prepared. "Read these, Danny, then you'll understand exactly what's been going on in this house." While Maya was sick in the bathroom, Danny read through the email thread. I watched his expression change from confusion to disbelief to anger. By the time he finished, his hands were shaking. "She's been planning this for months," he whispered. "Yes, the house, your savings, everything. She's been trying to get you declared incompetent so she could control your money. That's right." Maya stumbled back into the dining room, her face gray and her hair disheveled. She looked at the emails in Danny's hands and knew immediately that her game was over. "Danny, I can explain—" "Explain what?" Danny's voice was cold in a way I'd never heard before. "Explain how you've been plotting to steal from my mother? Explain how you've been gaslighting her for months, making her think she was losing her mind?" "It wasn't like that. I was thinking about our future, about what's best for everyone." "What's best for everyone or what's best for you?" Maya looked desperately between us. "Danny, please. You have to understand. Your mother is getting older. Eventually, she's going to need care." I was just trying to plan ahead. "By lying to me? By manipulating both of us? By stealing from her?" "I wasn't stealing anything. I stood up slowly, my voice quiet but firm. Maya, you calculated how long I was going to live. You figured out exactly how much money you could extract from my assets before I died. If that's not theft, what is it? Maya's face crumpled. Whether it was from the IPCAC or from being caught, she looked genuinely miserable. But I felt no sympathy for her. She'd shown me no mercy for months. Rose, please. I know how this looks, but you have to understand the pressure we're under. We want to start a family, to buy our own place someday. Your house is just sitting here, and you're not going to live forever. Stop. Danny's voice cut through her desperate explanation like a knife. Just stop talking. He turned to me, his eyes full of shame. Mom, I'm so sorry. I had no idea she was doing this. I thought she was genuinely concerned about you. She was very convincing, I said quietly. She almost had me convinced that I was losing my mind. The expired food, the criticism of your cooking, the comments about your memory, that was all calculated? All of it. Danny looked at his wife with disgust. How could you do this? How could you manipulate both of us like this? Maya was crying now, whether from illness or desperation. Danny, please, don't let her turn you against me. She's not innocent in this. Look what she did to me tonight. Danny looked confused. What do you mean? I decided it was time for complete honesty. I put something in Maya's food tonight, something to make her sick. Danny stared at me in shock. You poisoned her? Not poisoned, I gave her ipecac syrup. It's a safe, old-fashioned remedy that induces vomiting. She'll be fine in a few hours. Mom, why would you do that? Because she's been calling my cooking poison for months. She's been telling everyone that I'm dangerous, that I might accidentally poison someone. I thought she should know what it actually feels like to be poisoned. Maya looked up from her misery, her eyes blazing with fury. You're insane! You actually poisoned me! I gave you exactly what you've been giving me, Maya, a taste of your own medicine. Danny, do you see? This proves she's not competent. She's dangerous. But Danny wasn't buying it anymore. No, Maya, this proves that my mother is a lot smarter than either of us gave her credit for, and that you've been lying to me for months. Maya tried one more desperate appeal. Danny, please, we can work through this. We can get counseling, we can— No, Danny said firmly. We can't. This isn't a marriage problem, Maya. This is a character problem. You tried to steal from my mother. You manipulated both of us. You threw away her mother's baking pan and told her she was too old to cook. His voice broke slightly. You made her feel worthless in her own home. I never meant— Yes, you did. That's exactly what you meant. You wanted her to feel incompetent and confused so she'd be easier to control. Maya looked between us, realizing that her carefully constructed plan was falling apart. The nausea from the IPCAC was clearly making her miserable, but not nearly as miserable as watching her scheme collapse. Fine, she said finally, her voice bitter. You want to choose your mother over your wife? Go ahead. But don't come crying to me when she actually does start losing her mind. Don't come crying to me when you're spending all your money on home health aides and medical bills. I won't, Danny said quietly, because unlike you, I actually love my mother enough to take care of her properly, without stealing from her. Maya stood up unsteadily, still fighting waves of nausea. I'm going to my sister's tonight. We'll talk about this tomorrow when everyone's thinking more clearly. No, I said, my voice calm but absolute. We won't. What do you mean? I mean, you're not welcome in this house anymore, Maya. I want you out. You can't kick me out. I live here. Actually, I can. This is my house. My name is on the deed, and I'm telling you to leave. Danny. Maya turned to her husband desperately. Tell her she can't do this. Danny looked at his wife for a long moment, and I could see the last remnants of his love for her dying in his eyes. Pack your things, Maya. I'll help you load your car. You're choosing her over me? I'm choosing honesty over manipulation. I'm choosing love over greed. I'm choosing the woman who raised me over the woman who tried to steal from her. Maya's face twisted with rage. This isn't over. I'll fight this. I'll tell everyone what she did to me tonight. I'll have her arrested for assault. Go ahead, I said calmly. I'll be sure to show them the emails where you plotted to steal my life savings. I'm sure the police will be very interested in those. Maya's bravado crumbled. She knew she was beaten. Without another word, she stumbled upstairs to pack her things. An hour later, we watched her drive away, her car loaded with suitcases and boxes. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't apologize. She just left, taking her lies and her schemes with her. Danny and I stood in the doorway watching her taillights disappear down the street. When she was gone, he turned to me with tears in his eyes. Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I didn't see what she was doing. I'm sorry I didn't defend you. I'm sorry I almost let her destroy everything. I reached out and took his hand. You couldn't have known, Danny. She was very good at what she did. But I should have trusted you. I should have known you would never do anything to hurt anyone. Well, I said with a small smile, except for tonight. He actually laughed at that. Yeah, except for tonight. That was pretty brilliant, actually, giving her a taste of her own medicine. I thought it was appropriate. We went back inside and cleaned up the dinner dishes together, talking quietly about what had happened and what would happen next. Danny apologized over and over, and I forgave him over and over, because that's what mothers do. But as we worked, I couldn't help thinking about how close I'd come to losing everything. If I hadn't found those emails, if I hadn't fought back, Maya might have succeeded in her plan. I might have ended up in some facility, watching helplessly as she and Danny spent my life savings. The thought should have terrified me, but instead it made me feel powerful. I'd faced down my enemy and won. I'd reclaimed my home and my dignity. I'd shown Maya and Danny exactly who they were dealing with. But most importantly, I'd proven to myself that I wasn't the helpless old woman Maya wanted everyone to think I was. I was Rose, and I was still writing my own story. The real poison in this house hadn't been my cooking or expired oregano. It had been Maya's lies and manipulation, and now that poison was gone, expelled from my home like a sickness that had finally been cured. What would you have done if you caught your daughter-in-law red-handed planning to steal your life? Was Rose's revenge too harsh, or exactly what Maya deserved? 3 days after Maya left, the phone call came that changed everything. I was in my garden, finally able to enjoy the morning peace without her critical voice commenting on how I was overwatering my tomatoes or wasting time on flowers when I could be doing something useful. Mrs. Rose Patterson? The voice was crisp, professional. Yes, this is Rose. My name is Jennifer Chen. I'm a lawyer with Henderson Walsh and Associates. I'm calling regarding the estate of your aunt, Margaret Holloway. Aunt Maggie. I hadn't thought about her in years. She'd been my father's sister, a woman who'd never married and had lived alone in a small town about 3 hours away. We'd exchanged Christmas cards, but I hadn't seen her since my husband's funeral 15 years ago. I'm sorry to tell you that Ms. Holloway passed away 6 months ago, the lawyer continued. We've been trying to locate her beneficiaries. You've inherited her property. I'm sorry, what? Your aunt left you her bakery and the building it's housed in. There's also a small apartment above the shop. The property is located in Millbrook Falls. I sat down heavily on my garden bench. Aunt Maggie had owned a bakery? I don't understand. I didn't even know she had a bakery. According to our records, she opened Maggie's Sweet Dreams Bakery about 20 years ago. It's been closed since her death, but the building and all the equipment are in good condition. Would you like to schedule a time to view the property? After I hung up, I sat in my garden for a long time, staring at the phone. A bakery. My aunt had owned a bakery, and now it was mine. The irony was almost too perfect to believe. I dreamed of opening a bakery when I was young, fresh out of high school with stars in my eyes and recipes in my head. But then I'd met my husband, gotten married, had Danny, become a widow too young. Life had happened, and dreams had been set aside for survival. Now, at 66, after being told I was too old to cook safely, after having my abilities questioned and my confidence shattered, I'd inherited the very thing I'd always wanted. That afternoon, I drove to Millbrook Falls. It was a small town, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and the main street was lined with independent shops that had somehow survived the march of chain stores and online shopping. Maggie's Sweet Dreams Bakery sat right in the heart of downtown, a narrow building wedged between a bookstore and a flower shop. The windows were dusty and covered with brown paper, but I could see through the gaps where the paper had peeled away. Jennifer Chen met me at the door with a set of keys. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with kind eyes and a gentle way of speaking that reminded me of my aunt. "Your aunt was quite a character," she said as she unlocked the door. "Everyone in town loved her. She never married, never had children, but she treated this whole community like her family." The door swung open with a creak, and I stepped into my inheritance. The bakery was like stepping back in time. Display cases lined one wall, their glass still clean despite months of abandonment. Behind the counter, I could see into the kitchen area where industrial mixers and ovens waited silently. The smell of flour and sugar still lingered in the air, as if the building itself remembered what it had been. "She left everything exactly as it was," Jennifer explained. "All the equipment, the recipes, even her personal items upstairs. She was very specific in her will that it should all go to you." "Why me?" I asked, running my hand along the smooth counter. "We weren't that close." "She mentioned you specifically, said you were the only one in the family who understood what food meant to people. She said you had the gift." The gift. I'd never thought of my cooking as a gift. Lately, it had felt more like a curse, something people tolerated rather than enjoyed. We climbed the narrow stairs to the apartment above the shop. It was small but charming, with large windows that looked out over the main street. The furniture was simple but comfortable, and the kitchen, even this small residential one, was equipped with the same care and attention as the bakery below. On the kitchen table, I found an envelope with my name written in Aunt Maggie's familiar handwriting. "She left this for you," Jennifer said quietly. "I'll wait downstairs while you read it." I sat down at the small table and opened the envelope with trembling fingers. "My dear Rose," the letter began. "If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you've inherited my little piece of heaven. I know this might come as a surprise, but I've been watching your life from afar, and I think you'll understand why I chose you. I never had children of my own, but I had this bakery. Every cake I baked, every loaf of bread, every cookie that went home with a smiling child, these were my children. This place was how I loved the world. I know you gave up your dreams to raise your son, to be a good wife and mother. That's admirable, and I'm proud of you for it. But now it's time for your second act. It's time to remember who you were before the world told you to be smaller. The recipes are all here. The equipment is yours. The community is waiting. All you have to do is turn on the ovens and start baking. Don't let anyone tell you you're too old for new beginnings." I started this bakery when I was 46, after I lost my job at the bank. Some people said I was crazy. Those people weren't eating my apple turnovers. Bake with love, Rose. Fill this place with the smells of home. Show them what real food made with real care tastes like. The building is paid for, the equipment is maintained, and there's enough money in the business account to get you started. The rest is up to you. With all my love and faith in your future, Aunt Maggie, P.S. The secret to my cinnamon rolls is a touch of cardamom. Don't tell anyone. I sat there with tears streaming down my face, reading and rereading the letter. My aunt had seen something in me that I'd forgotten existed. She'd given me not just a bakery, but permission to dream again. When I went back downstairs, Jennifer was examining one of the ovens. "These are beautiful machines," she said. "Your aunt took excellent care of everything. You could literally start baking tomorrow if you wanted to. Is there really money in the business account? About $15,000. Plus, the building is owned free and clear, so there's no mortgage or rent to worry about. The utilities are current. The health department permits just need to be renewed. Your aunt made this as easy as possible for whoever inherited it. I spent the next 2 hours exploring every corner of the bakery. The kitchen was a baker's dream. 2 large commercial ovens, a dough mixer that could handle 50 pounds of flour, refrigeration units, prep tables, everything I'd ever imagined having in my own place. But it was the recipe collection that really took my breath away. Aunt Maggie had left behind hundreds of recipes, all handwritten on index cards and organized in wooden boxes. There were basics like white bread and chocolate chip cookies, but also elaborate wedding cakes and delicate pastries I'd only seen in magazines. Each recipe card was annotated with notes. Mrs. Johnson's favorite for her bridge club, or perfect for rainy Saturday mornings, or the Williams family orders these every Christmas. These weren't just recipes, they were relationships, connections between my aunt and the people she'd fed. I drove home that evening in a daze. When I walked into my house, it felt different somehow, smaller, less like home than it had that morning. Danny was in the kitchen making himself a sandwich when I came in. "How was your day, Mom?" I told him about the phone call, about the bakery, about Aunt Maggie's letter. He listened with growing amazement. "Mom, this is incredible. A bakery. Your own bakery. I know it sounds crazy, but it doesn't sound crazy at all. It sounds perfect." He paused, studying my face. "You're thinking about doing it, aren't you? Actually opening the bakery." "I don't know. Maybe. It's been so long since I baked professionally. And at my age..." "Mom, stop. Don't let Maya's voice in your head tell you you're too old for anything. You're 66, not 96. And after what happened this week, I think you could use a fresh start." That night, I lay awake thinking about possibilities. What would it be like to wake up every morning and go to work doing something I loved? What would it be like to feed people who actually appreciated what I made? What would it be like to have my own place where nobody could tell me my cooking was poison or my methods were outdated? The next morning, I called Jennifer Chen and told her I wanted to move forward with taking over the bakery. She arranged for me to meet with the health department about renewing permits, with the insurance company about coverage, with the accountant who'd handled Aunt Maggie's books. While I was taking care of the business details, something unexpected happened. Word got out in Millbrook Falls that Maggie's niece was planning to reopen the bakery. Jennifer told me that people had been calling her office, asking when I'd be ready to start baking. "Your aunt had quite a following," she explained. "There's a whole group of people who've been making a 40-minute drive to the next town just to buy decent pastries since she died. They're very excited about the possibility of the bakery reopening." The thought of people actually wanting my baking was both thrilling and terrifying. What if I'd lost my touch? What if my skills weren't as good as I remembered? What if Maya had been right about my abilities? But then I remembered the look on Danny's face when he'd eaten my eggs Benedict. I remembered the compliments I'd gotten at church potlucks and school bake sales over the years. I remembered the joy I'd felt as a young woman, experimenting with recipes and creating something beautiful and delicious from simple ingredients. I spent the next week dividing my time between Millbrook Falls and home, learning the bakery's systems and getting familiar with the equipment. The health inspector came out and was impressed with how well-maintained everything was. The insurance company was happy to continue the existing policy. Even the bank was enthusiastic about working with me. But the real test came when I decided to try baking something. I chose Aunt Maggie's cinnamon roll recipe, the one with the secret cardamom that she'd mentioned in her letter. I arrived at the bakery at 5 in the morning, just as the sun was beginning to rise over the main street. The building felt different in the early morning light, alive somehow as if it was waking up along with me. I mixed the dough by hand, the way my mother had taught me, feeling the texture change under my fingers as the gluten developed. I rolled it out thin, brushed it with butter, sprinkled it with cinnamon and sugar and just a pinch of cardamom. The rolls went into the oven just as the first commuters were beginning to walk past the window. The smell that filled the bakery was pure magic, rich, sweet, comforting. The smell of home and happiness and everything good about food made with love. When the timer went off, I pulled out 24 perfect cinnamon rolls, golden brown and glistening with glaze. I hadn't lost my touch. If anything, years of cooking for an unappreciative audience had sharpened my skills, made me more careful, more precise. I was just pulling the second batch from the oven when someone knocked on the front door. Through the glass, I could see an elderly man with a hopeful expression. I opened the door and he smiled broadly. Are those Maggie's cinnamon rolls I smell? They are. Well, her recipe anyway. I'm Rose, Maggie's niece. Tom Henderson. I've been walking past this place every morning for 6 months, hoping someone would turn those ovens back on. Maggie made the best cinnamon rolls in 3 counties. Would you like to try one? I'd love to know how they compare to hers. Tom took a bite of the still-warm cinnamon roll and his eyes closed in bliss. Oh my goodness. That's exactly right. That's exactly how they should taste. By the time I finished cleaning up the kitchen an hour later, I'd sold all 24 cinnamon rolls to people who'd seen Tom walking down the street with his bakery box, or who'd simply followed their noses to my door. Mrs. Peterson from the flower shop next door bought 6. For my book club, she explained, we've been serving store-bought pastries since Maggie died. This is so much better. A young mother with 2 small children bought 8. These are exactly like the ones my grandmother used to make, she said, tears in her eyes. A construction worker bought 3 and ate them standing right there on the sidewalk. Lady, when are you opening for real? Because I'm going to be here every morning. I drove home that afternoon with an empty cash box and a full heart. For the first time in months, people had eaten my food and smiled. They'd asked for more. They'd told me it was good, it was perfect. It was exactly what they'd been missing. That evening, I made a decision. I was going to move to Millbrook Falls and reopen Aunt Maggie's bakery. Not someday, not eventually, but soon. As soon as I could arrange everything. When I told Danny, he was quiet for a long moment. I'll miss you, he said finally. It's only 3 hours away. You can visit whenever you want. It's not the distance, Mom. It's... After everything that happened with Maya, I feel like I need to make things right with you. I feel like I owe you something. You don't owe me anything, Danny. You're my son. I love you. That's not conditional on anything. But I let her treat you badly. I didn't defend you when I should have. You were manipulated by someone you trusted. That's not your fault. Still, I hate the idea of you leaving because of what we put you through. I reached across the table and took his hand. Danny, I'm not leaving because of what happened here. I'm leaving because of what's waiting for me there. This is about moving towards something wonderful, not running away from something painful. Are you sure? I'm more sure of this than I've been of anything in years. And I was. For the first time since my husband died, I felt like I had a purpose again. Not just as Danny's mother or someone's caretaker, but as Rose, the woman who could transform flour and sugar and eggs into joy. The bakery wasn't just Aunt Maggie's gift to me. It was her way of telling me that my story wasn't over, that there were still chapters to be written. Maya had tried to convince everyone that I was past my expiration date, but Aunt Maggie knew better. I wasn't ending. I was just beginning. 2 weeks later, I put my house on the market and started packing. But not everything was coming with me to my new life. I left behind the new baking pans Maya had bought, the ones that had no history or heart. Instead, I carefully wrapped my mother's old sheet pan, the one I'd rescued from the trash, and packed it in my car. Some things are too precious to leave behind, and some things are exactly what? You need to start over. What's the biggest risk you've ever taken to follow a dream? Do you think Rose is crazy for starting over at 66, or the smartest woman alive? 6 months later, I stood behind the counter of Rose's Sweet Dreams Bakery. I'd kept Aunt Maggie's name but added my own. watching the morning rush that had become as reliable as sunrise. Mrs. Peterson stopped by for her daily blueberry muffin before opening the flower shop. Tom Henderson arrived precisely at 7 for his cinnamon roll and black coffee. The construction crew working on the new library renovation had started timing their coffee break around my fresh batch of apple turnovers. But this morning was special. This morning, a young woman with a camera and a press badge was sitting at my corner table, notebook open, recording our conversation. "So tell me, Rose," she said, "what's it like to start completely over at 66? Her name was Sarah Mitchell, and she wrote for a lifestyle blog called Second Acts that featured people who'd made major life changes later in life. She'd heard about my story through the local newspaper article that had run when I reopened the bakery. "It's terrifying and wonderful," I told her honestly. "Every day I wake up and can't quite believe this is my life now." "Your story has really resonated with our readers. A woman who was being pushed into assisted living by her family, who fought back and ended up starting her own business. It's inspiring." "I didn't set out to inspire anyone. I just refused to disappear quietly." Sarah laughed. "That's exactly what makes it inspiring. Can you tell me about the moment you knew you had to fight back?" I thought about that dinner party, about Maya's cruel words about my cooking being poison. It was when I realized that the people who were supposed to love me had started seeing me as a burden instead of a person, when I understood that they were planning my life without consulting me. And now? I gestured around the bakery, which was humming with morning activity. Now I feed people who appreciate what I make. I wake up excited about my day instead of dreading it. I'm not invisible anymore. What would you say to other older adults who feel like their families are trying to push them aside? I'd say don't let anyone convince you that your expiration date has passed. Don't let anyone make you feel like a burden when you're actually a gift. And if the people around you can't see your worth, find people who can. After Sarah left, I spent the afternoon preparing for the evening's special event. Once a month, I hosted Comfort Food Fridays, where I served a 3-course dinner to 24 guests. Tonight's menu featured my stuffed cabbage rolls, the same dish Maya had called poison, along with homemade bread and apple pie. Every seat was booked weeks in advance. People drove from 4 towns over to eat at my little bakery, not because I was famous, but because word had spread that the food here was made with love by someone who remembered what that meant. As I rolled the cabbage leaves and mixed the filling, I thought about how different my life had become. 6 months ago, I'd been invisible in my own home, criticized and dismissed. Now I was the heart of a small community, feeding people who looked forward to seeing me. Danny visited twice a month, always bringing friends or coworkers who wanted to try his mother's famous baking. He'd gained weight since I moved out. Apparently, he wasn't much of a cook himself, but he looked happier, lighter. The tension that had filled our house was gone. "I never realized how miserable we all were until you left," he'd told me on his last visit. "The house feels so empty now, but not sad empty. Peaceful empty." He'd filed for divorce from Maya 2 months after I moved out. She'd tried to fight it, claiming he was having a breakdown, that I'd brainwashed him somehow. But the emails I'd found had made their way to Danny's lawyer, and Maya's credibility was destroyed. The last I'd heard, she was living with her sister and working at a chain restaurant, complaining to anyone who'd listen about how her crazy mother-in-law had ruined her marriage. The irony wasn't lost on me. She was actually serving food now instead of just criticizing other people's cooking. At 5 o'clock, my dinner guests started arriving. There was Judge Brennan, Harold's son, who drove over from the county seat every month. There was Dr. Martinez, my old physician, who'd started recommending my bakery to patients who needed therapeutic pie. There were young couples on dates, elderly widows who'd found community at my tables, families celebrating birthdays and anniversaries. As I served the cabbage rolls, I watched people's faces light up with the first bite. "This is incredible," said a young man who'd never tasted homemade cabbage rolls before. "It tastes like love. Tastes like love. Not like poison, like love." After dinner, as I was cleaning up the kitchen, I found a letter that had been slipped under the bakery door. My name was written on the envelope in shaky handwriting. Inside, I found a note from Mrs. Whitman, an 80-year-old woman who lived alone and came in every Tuesday for tea and a scone. "Dear Rose," it read, "I wanted you to know that your bakery saved my life. After my husband died last year, I stopped cooking, stopped eating properly, stopped caring about much of anything. But every Tuesday, I force myself to get dressed and walk to your shop. And every Tuesday, you make me feel like I matter. You remember how I like my tea? You ask about my garden. You treat me like a person instead of just another old lady taking up space. Thank you for reminding me that I'm still here, still worth feeding, still worth knowing. With gratitude, Eleanor Whitman." I sat there in my quiet kitchen, surrounded by the lingering smells of dinner and the warm glow of a day well spent, and felt a deep satisfaction I'd never experienced before. This was what I'd been meant to do all along. Not just cook and bake, but nourish. Not just feed bodies, but feed souls. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, the blogger who'd interviewed me that morning. "Article goes live Monday. Thank you for sharing your story. You're going to inspire so many people." The next week, her article was published with the headline, "From Poison to Purpose: How One Woman Turned Family Betrayal into Sweet Success." Within days, it had been shared thousands of times on social media. My little bakery's phone started ringing with interview requests, feature story pitches, even a call from a television producer who wanted to include my story in a documentary about late-in-life entrepreneurs. I turned down most of the requests. I wasn't interested in fame or becoming some kind of symbol. I just wanted to bake and serve my community. But the attention did bring something wonderful. Letters from people all over the country who'd read my story and felt inspired to make changes in their own lives. A 70-year-old woman in Texas wrote to tell me she'd left her controlling daughter's house and moved into her own apartment. A 68-year-old man in Maine had started the woodworking business he'd always dreamed of. A grandmother in Oregon had stood up to her family's attempts to put her in a nursing home and was now thriving in her own place. "You showed me that it's never too late to take your life back," one letter read. "Thank you for proving that we don't have to accept other people's limits on who we can be." That's when I realized that my story wasn't really about Maya or revenge or even starting a bakery. It was about refusing to become invisible. It was about remembering that every person has value regardless of their age. It was about the difference between surviving and thriving. 6 months ago, I was told my cooking was poison. Today, I serve food that heals hearts and builds community. 6 months ago, I was being pushed toward a facility where I could quietly fade away. Today, I'm the center of a thriving business that brings joy to hundreds of people. The real poison was never my food. It was the lie that older people are burdens instead of blessings. It was the idea that experience is worthless and that wisdom expires at some arbitrary age. It was the notion that someone else gets to decide when your useful life is over. Maya thought she could push me out of my own story. Instead, she pushed me into the best chapter of my life. Every morning when I unlock the bakery door and turn on the ovens, I think about Aunt Maggie's letter. "Don't let anyone tell you you're too old for new beginnings," she'd written. She was right. At 66, I'm not ending anything. I'm just getting started. Some ingredients get better with age, and some recipes are worth waiting a lifetime to perfect. As I write this, sitting in my little apartment above the bakery, I can smell tomorrow's bread, rising in the refrigerator downstairs. In a few hours, I'll go down and start the ovens, roll out fresh pastry, brew the first pot of coffee. People will start arriving before I even open, drawn by the smells and the promise of food made with care. That's my life now. That's my victory. Not revenge against the people who underestimated me, but proof that they were wrong. I'm Rose. I'm 66 years old, and I'm just getting started. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Have you ever felt invisible in your own life? Have you ever been told you're too old for something you wanted to do? Drop a comment below and tell me about a time you refused to accept someone else's limits on your dreams. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of people who refuse to go quietly into the night. Remember, it's never too late to take your life back. It's never too late to start over. And it's never too late to show the world exactly who you really are. Your age is not your expiration date. Your best chapters might still be waiting to be written.